What's up, dudes? Max here, back with another update in regards to all the tech that I got going on in this room and a little bit of a tutorial that I get a ton of questions about, which is in regards to audio. I'm going to tell you the audio equipment I use here, as well as what I do to get everything sounding the way it does. But before that, this is a sponsored video. ASUS helps me out by providing hardware for the YouTube channel, as well as the live stream, and they have graced me with the GeForce GTX 1080 Ti. I haven't even had the chance to open this thing up and put it in yet, but this stuff is pretty important, especially if you are going to be live streaming, considering the fact that if you're on a single station, live streaming does take a bit of GPU to actually increase the performance and a little bit of the offset of what the CPU requires. So if you guys are on a single setup and you need to run multiple monitors where you're running the game as well as your broadcast window on two different monitors, it's pretty helpful to have a GPU that can handle it. And my God, the 1080 Ti right now is kind of killing it in terms of performance. So I can't wait to put this thing in. If you want to check it out, the link is in the description below, but shout outs to them. They did help out by sponsoring this video. Now, talking about the audio setup I use, I have a regular MXL condenser microphone going into a USB mixer. Either of those things can be interchanged with any other kind of condenser microphone or USB mixers, but what really happens is behind the scenes of getting it to sound the way it does right now. Now, I'll go from the very beginning, which starts with something called a virtual audio cable. You need a way of outputting your audio signal to a source that can be recognized in all your audio recording programs. Whether it's a live stream or Audacity or however you're recording your stuff, you need an output signal. And I believe this software isn't very expensive. I bought it a few years back and it was only like maybe 20 bucks. And it's been ridiculously helpful because what we're essentially going to do is take our voice, which goes through our microphone, to our mixer, into the computer, and the computer is going to process all the information as well as clean it up, add some EQ, and make it sound as good as it does. This process starts here in something called Adobe Audition. You can use other programs to make this happen, but I've always used Adobe Audition for this. So here's what I do. Essentially, I have a preset of different kinds of effects and equalization and audio balancing that I use for this. And it all really comes down to the effects that I use to get my voice sounding this way. My input right now is my regular USB microphone, as well as my output being the stereo virtual audio cable. Now, what the big thing is, like I said, is the effects. What do I use to make it sound the way it does? The first thing is adaptive noise reduction. And here's the specific settings I use for adaptive noise reduction. A lot of this stuff is going to take all the extra noises that are going on in the background or things that aren't quite loud enough that might pop up. It eliminates those, along with a couple other settings. Take a look at this one if you need it right here. The next one is called dynamics processing, and it'd be tough for me to actually explain how this works, but it essentially condenses and expands your audio, making the parts that are loud to not spike too loud, and the parts that are low to be a little bit higher, and the ones that are too low to be muted completely. Please copy this preset. It's taken me a long time to figure out how to get this thing over here to be the way it is, but this is a really good start, especially if you want to get something to sound like the way it does. Next up is the multiband compressor effect. Like I said before, take a look at these settings. It's currently manipulating my audio and outputting it right now. That's exactly what you want to do if you're using Adobe Audition as well. Start with this and then go from there. Next up is the hard limiter effect. Now, I don't remember exactly what this one does. I think it limits the amount of peaking that you can actually do and kind of cleans up the really high signals that go way too high. It kind of fixes all that so that if I'm talking low or really low, it makes it a little bit higher and things like that. I'm pretty sure that's what it does. Either way, I recommend just copying these settings. I'm not exactly sure what hard limiter does, but it definitely helps because when I turn it off, everything sounds like butt. Now, you can do a lot of other really cool stuff with this. For example, every once in a while, I like to bring on this big, creepy scrublord voice, and that is done through a studio reverb and chorus, which manipulates the voice to be multiple voices and echoes and everything like that. So if I give this a little bit of a second, all of a sudden, I sound like this.
And if you get really close, it sounds ridiculous.
The biggest thing with this is that it's going to take a little bit of time to process this information, which completely comes down to syncing your audio to your video. Right here, you're looking at my audio hardware preferences, and I like to keep this stuff at a sample rate of about 48,000 hertz and the latency at about 100 ms. So that's 100 milliseconds, but it can vary quite a bit in terms of how fast it actually gets to the virtual audio cable. I've kind of boiled it down to around 350 to 450 or so in terms of millisecond delay, but we can actually check that in Xsplit, which allows us to delay our audio and even delay the visuals that are coming from the capture to kind of sync everything up and make sure it sounds good. So here we are in Xsplit. I'm sorry how this looks. It's going to be really weird because you're going to see stuff happening in the past, in the future, in the present. But just take a look at a couple of settings I have here. If we go into our tools and then down to settings itself, we can see how everything is actually manipulated in audio. Default speakers are my system sound, as well as my microphone being line 1. That's it, taking the audio, which is from Adobe Audition, and outputting it to that line 1 virtual audio cable, which takes all the compression and all the crazy stuff, outputs it there so the computer is recognizing a digital audio cable. It might seem a little weird, but it makes a lot more sense if you don't think too much about it. So now we gotta find out how delayed our audio is coming from our cameras and everything like that. If I actually go to one of my cameras, the one I'm using right now, we can quickly take a look that I have the delay set at about 530. So that's just about half a second that it requires the audio information to come through to get us something that makes it sound like I'm talking in accordance with the camera you're seeing right now. I want to give you an example. I'm going to set this down to 0, which is what everything comes at by default. Refresh it really quick. We're back, and everything should be horrifically out of sync by about half a second. This is really annoying. Set this back to 530 ms and we're completely good. This should be about what I usually use to sync up everything. At that point, you'd want to delay your game captures, any of your webcams, anything like that should be around 530 or whatever it is for your end. You kind of have to take video examples and record yourself talking and just kind of line it up to figure out what works best. And that's what I've been doing with my streams for years now to try to get the best audio quality possible. Like I said, take those settings that I was using in Adobe Audition, try to work with them on your own because every microphone is different, everything's going to sound different, but this is what I have been using for a long time to get it to sound the way it does, and I'd like to give you an example of what it sounds like without it. I almost have to shout into this microphone. It does a lot in terms of audio quality, and the reason the mic is this low is so that I have no chance to peak this bitch. That's as high as it's going to go, and it's going to preserve the audio as much as possible. So, when we come back and the audio is working great again, it sounds really good when it's going through all the processing, the virtual audio cable, as well as Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition can be kind of expensive, but I'm pretty sure a lot of the Adobe suite can be practically rented, where you just pay like a monthly fee for as long as you want to use it. I'm fairly sure that's still how it works, but I bought mine a long time ago. This is a really outdated Adobe Audition, but it still does what I need it to do. Either way, I hope that helps out. I get a ton of questions regarding this audio setup that I have. I do very similar things in terms of recording voiceover, where I have the multiband compressor and the dynamics processing, and I pretty much apply that to my audio and then make it sound as good as it does. But hopefully this helps you guys out. Might be complicated for some, but for guys that are looking to get the best audio possible from your streams, this is what I've been using for a few years now. As always, dudes, thank you a ton for watching. If you want to check out that ASUS GTX 1080 Ti graphics card, it's in the description below. And another big shout out to ASUS for sponsoring this video, as well as sponsoring this stream and YouTube channel for a bunch of hardware that has helped out a ton over the past few months. As always, guys, thank you a ton for watching. My name is Max, and I'll see you next time.